Can a Catholic swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution to serve as a police officer and/or U.S. soldier in the Department of Uniformed Forces? I think maybe he meant armed forces, but I suppose
yeah,
generally speaking.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's two things. First, the United States, no pope or bishops of the United States ever condemned that. I mean, that has been around since 1789. And it was never condemned to do that. And there's many people that served in the armed forces and took those oaths, and no pope said, or holy office, nobody condemned it. So that's number one, which I think is very significant. Number two is that, as we had a discussion about the First Amendment, which is the irritating thing in it, the original idea of that was that Congress, that is the federal government, would not establish religions in the states, that the establishment of religion was up to the states. You see, so there is nothing offensive to that given the federal aspect of the government, and that is that the central government was meant merely to conduct war, foreign policy, post office, and a few other disputes between the states. It was meant to be a weak thing in the middle of all of these states, that it would just do things that were common to the states. But for example, it doesn't prosecute for murder. See, states do that, or for theft. You see, that's not in the federal. Even today, it wouldn't do that. You could understand it in that way, and actually, that is not offensive. That some sort of federal entity would not impose, just as in Switzerland you have Catholic cantons and Protestant cantons. They have a federal government that does not impose either one or the other. See, so you could understand it in that way, and I think that was the way it was meant. And as I said, what is more problematic in the American system is the general attitude of non-establishment of religion. That is, to keep religion out of society, out of government. That is more problematic. That is a culture that we have, which is not a good culture.
Well, and it affects our mind. You're saying there's so many of us who come to the traditional Catholic Mass who we've come from being raised in America, in which we think, oh, it's good that there's these separate spheres, and this idea of a secular way of thinking, and not realizing this is just an anti-Catholic way of thinking, that you could ever have a secular society. That's a crazy idea.
It's to commit ultimately suicide of the society. If Christ is not the king, as he is the king of the whole universe, and if you exclude him from society, you are leaving the population or placing them in the hands of original sin and its effects. If you get rid of the Redeemer, you have a population that is infected with the effects of original sin, and we are seeing that in our society today, this sinking of the morality of society and the insanity of society. Ben Carson was just talking about this case in Long Island where somebody bought a house for $2 million, not far from where I grew up.
And then there was a squatter in there.
And there's a squatter, and they can't get him out because of a New York law that they have rights. And he said, we have lost our minds. And he's right. We have lost our minds. This is what happens. Human beings sink into ignorance and stupidity and immorality without a savior, without the grace of God. And so that's what you're doing when you say no religion in society.
And whatever is left. So if you remove that, even the leftover, different people have talked about it as a train, and even if you remove it, the train still keeps moving. The momentum of Christianity has carried us to this point, and even now we see this fragmentation of, well, if I remove religion, all I have left is my ethnicity and my country, and then mass immigration changes the makeup of the ethnicity of your country, yes. And now that fragments as well. So they've got nothing left to hold on to.
No, it's to commit a suicide, and this is the only time in the history of the world in which religion was not connected to society. This is all from the 18th century thinking, John Locke and all of these other liberal Protestant thinkers, and some Catholics too, Voltaire, and people baptized Catholic, Montesquieu and others, this idea that there should be a separation of church and state. This has infected the modern world. And with World War I, it was accomplished because you had some big states like Russia or like Germany that had established Christian religions. I mean, not Catholic, obviously, but at least there was some idea that God should be in the state. You see, and even the Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Empire, Ottoman Empire had an established Islam. The Austrian Empire had established Catholicism, and that was all done away with at that time. So you had a completely secularized Western world, and that's really when the Western world put the gun to its head and eventually pulled the trigger, as far as the decadence of society. And we have seen it sink. I mean, the whole rise of Nazism, which was totally atheistic, and communism during that, right after World War One. And now we have wokeism and I mean, just it's enough to make you sick.
I mean, it's a great shame to the Christian nations that it's only in Islamic states that you see societies that see a theological connection to the government of the state and to the life of families and how things should be done. Obviously, there are excesses with Islam and other problems there, but they see it as all part of one universe. There isn't a secular world and an Islamic world. It's one. And Christianity normally sees things this way as well.
Yes.